Israeli strikes on Lebanon continued for the second day on Tuesday local time, killing more than 560 people and injuring nearly 2,000 during the 2 days. Lebanon's Hezbollah fired back as the conflict intensifies. The number of births in South Korea rebounded to the 20,000 range in July, while the number of people tying the knots was at a record high. The OECD projects South Korea's economy to grow 2.5% this year, backed by strong chip demand. The world economy is expected to expand at a stable level of 3.2%. It's September 25th, 6 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin with escalating conflict in the Middle East. In Lebanon, more than 500 people have been killed so far as the deadly Israeli attack continues. Meanwhile, Hezbollah fired a rocket towards its target near Tel Aviv. Pei Yun-ji brings the latest.
Warning sirens sounded in Israel's economic capital of Tel Aviv on Wednesday, sending residents to bomb shelters as a missile was intercepted by the country's air defense systems after it was detected crossing from Lebanon. The Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah in Lebanon said Wednesday that it fired the ballistic missile, targeting the headquarters of Israel's Mossad intelligence agency, in direct revenge for the walkie-talkie and pager attacks last week. The attack also comes after Hezbollah confirmed that its senior commander, Ibrahim Kubaish, was killed in an Israeli airstrike on Tuesday. Israel has been carrying out Operation Northern Arrows this week, conducting airstrikes targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon since Monday, killing at least 569 people. Monday's attack was the deadliest bombardment in the country since Israel's war with Hezbollah in 2006.
It was stronger than the July war in 2006. Yesterday, they started intensifying the attacks on us here, just like before. They don't care whether they hit a child, a woman, a man, the elderly, or the young.
The Israeli strikes continued throughout Tuesday and early on Wednesday on South and East Lebanon, and children were among those injured in the attacks.
My children and I were at home, working and relying on God for support when the Israeli enemy hit us. They are just children.
As the fighting intensifies, tens of thousands of Lebanese have fled their homes, with many crossing into neighboring Syria. But Israel vowed to continue its attacks.
We will continue to hit Hezbollah. And I say to the people of Lebanon, our war is not with you. Our war is with Hezbollah.
As the international community works to reduce tensions in the region, Lebanon says the United States is the only country that can end the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. After U.S. President Joe Biden made an address at the UN General Assembly in New York that full-scale war is not in anyone's interest, Lebanon's foreign minister criticized the remarks, saying it's not strong and not promising. Heunji, Arirang News.
So as we heard in New York, world leaders have gathered for this year's UN General Assembly seeking to address global challenges. Conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine are likely to top the agenda. Cha Yun-kyung has more.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres denounced on Tuesday local time a growing number of governments and other groups who feel they are entitled to get out of jail free card, citing wars in Ukraine, the Gaza Strip, and Sudan. He called the conflict in Ukraine a war spreading with no signs of letting up, with civilians paying the price, and also reaffirmed his condemnation of abhorrent acts of terror committed by Hamas.
The level of impunity in the world is politically indefensible and morally intolerable. They can trample international law. They can violate the United Nations Charter. They can turn a blind eye to international human rights conventions or the decisions of international courts.
World leaders raised concerns on the major spike in violence in Lebanon. Maldives President Mohamed Muizzu condemned Israeli acts of terrorism, saying those are interpreted as nothing but brutal attacks. Jordan's King Abdullah II called on the global community to address the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza, where more than 40,000 Palestinians have been killed.
We have seen that clearly in the dangerous developments in Lebanon over the past few days. This has to stop.
While there was a majority of voices raising concerns over the need to address international conflicts, no specific solutions were suggested. Speeches on Israel and Palestine, a main area of concern, will be held on Thursday local time. 차윤경, Arirang News.
Also in New York, delegations representing South Korea and the U.S. both condemned the illegal weapons trade between Russia and North Korea, saying that such action violated the UNSC resolutions. Our Lee Shi-hu reports.
South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yul told the UNSC on Tuesday that Russia's illegal weapons trade with North Korea, while being a permanent member of the UN Security Council, is deplorable.
Any cooperation that directly or indirectly aids North Korea's military capability is a blatant violation of the relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions and undermines non-proliferation regime.
Referring to the war between Ukraine and Russia, the minister emphasized the role of the Security Council in maintaining peace and security in the global society. Speaking in the same vein, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken condemned the actions by Russia and its weapon suppliers, mainly Iran and North Korea.
Support from Tehran and Pyongyang is helping Putin inflict carnage, suffering, and ruin on innocent Ukrainian men, women, and children.
Blinken urged Moscow to adhere to the rulings of the UN.
These actions by Iran, North Korea, and Russia have violated multiple Security Council resolutions. Resolutions that Russia voted for and, as a permanent member, has a special responsibility to enforce.
Meanwhile, Cho Hyun-dong, the Korean ambassador to the U.S., warned on Tuesday of North Korea's potential provocations during the upcoming period of change within the U.S. administration following its November presidential election. Cho further urged Seoul and Washington to work together to maintain an around-the-clock response system against Pyongyang, mentioning North Korea's recent moves announcing its new missile launchers and uranium facilities. In the past, North Korea has initiated acts of provocation ahead of major political events in the U.S. In the case of any similar provocation this fall, Seoul and Washington are expected to respond according to their mutually agreed response manuals, depending on the type of provocation. Lee Shi-hu, Arirang News.
The top diplomats of South Korea and Cuba have held talks for the first time since the two countries established diplomatic ties earlier this year. South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yul and his Cuban counterpart, Bruno Rodriguez Parrilla, met in New York on Tuesday local time on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. The two sides discussed a wide range of bilateral issues, including plans to set up embassies in each other's capital cities by the end of this year. Cuba, which has been and continues to be a close ally of North Korea, officially formed diplomatic relations with South Korea in February. In July, South Korea saw the largest increase in the number of births in almost 12 years. The number of marriages, a key factor affecting birth rates, also reached a record high for July. Shin Ha-young explains.
The number of births in South Korea in July rebounded to the 20,000 range for the first time in 6 months. Data from Statistics Korea released on Wednesday showed that there were 20,601 births, a 7.9% increase compared to the same month last year. This is the largest monthly year-on-year increase since October 2012. An official from the agency attributed the rise in July to a base effect from low birth rates the previous year, as there was a 6.8% year-on-year decrease in July last year. The growth was also due to more couples getting married after postponing their wedding during the earlier stages of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The rise in July is due to a surge in marriages after COVID-19, which picked up from August 2022 to March 2023. Typically, it takes about 2 years after marriage to have the first child.
The number of deaths rose 0.4%, bringing the natural decline in population to more than 7,600. Meanwhile, the number of marriages in July rose 32.9% to over 18,000. This is the biggest year-on-year increase for any July since data was first collected in 1981, and overall it's the largest in 28 years since January 1996, when there was a 50.6% increase. The official said that the sharp rise in the number of marriages was a positive sign, as it could lead to more births in the future. 신하영, Arirang News.
In efforts to fight the low birth rate, President Yoon says small to medium companies that create a family-work balance could get tax benefits and have deferments in tax audits. This came on Wednesday as he hosted the 4th Emergency Population Policy meeting with the Presidential Committee on Aging Society and Population Policy at the Korea Federation of SMEs. This meeting focused on successful instances by companies that were able to incorporate an atmosphere for employees to balance both family and work. Yoon emphasized that doing this is not just spending money, but an investment for the future of the companies while pledging the government's support. The OECD says the global economy is set to remain resilient, with inflation continuing to moderate in its latest outlook for the global economy and G20 countries. South Korea's economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year. Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
The OECD forecasts that the global economy will remain resilient, with inflation continuing to moderate. According to its latest interim economic outlook, Turning the Corner, released on Wednesday, the global economy is expected to grow by 3.2% both in 2024 and 2025. This year's projection is up by 0.1 percentage point from the previous forecast made this May. Inflation is projected to further ease, with consumer prices expected to rise 5.4% this year and 3.3% in 2025, which will contribute to real wage growth and an expansion in private consumption. As for a specific country and region, the U.S. is expected to grow by 2.6% this year and 1.6% in 2025, as the Fed recalibrates monetary policy to avoid a recession. In terms of the Eurozone, real wage growth and loosened monetary policy are projected to support growth of 0.7% this year and 1.3% in 2025. Meanwhile, in China, government stimulus measures are expected to offset weakened demand and a slowdown in the real estate sector, with growth of 4.9% in 2024 and 4.5% in 2025. As for the South Korean economy, it is projected to grow steadily by 2.5% in 2024 and 2.2% next year, with exports aided by the ongoing strength in global semiconductor demand. Inflation is expected to be 2.4% in 2024 and 2% in 2025, aligning with forecasts from major domestic and international institutions. The OECD cited trade tensions due to geopolitical risks, growth deceleration from a cooling labor market, and excessive volatility in financial markets if inflation easing falls short of expectations, as several downside risks to global economic growth. It advised central banks to keep lowering policy rates if inflation eases and labor market pressure is low. On the fiscal policy side, it stressed the need for decisive efforts to ensure debt sustainability in the medium term in preparation for future fiscal needs. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The Asian Development Bank has maintained its growth projection for the Korean economy this year, also at 2.5%. The bank's forecast stands on par with that by the International Monetary Fund and the Bank of Korea. As for the factors behind the forecast are global demand for Korean chips and that for its cars. In the meantime, the bank has kept its outlook for the broader Asia-Pacific region unchanged from its forecast back in July of 5% this year, citing the upcycle of the chip industry and steady demand for electronics. In other news, the 2024 U.S. presidential election will take place on November 5th. And while the latest polls point to a potential victory for Vice President Kamala Harris, the race looks to be too close for comfort. Lee Seung-jae has more.
With around 6 weeks to go until the U.S. presidential elections in November, many pundits expect the race to be one of the closest. However, recent election polls show contrasting results, making it even more difficult to predict the outcome of the presidential race. According to the results of a poll conducted by CNN and SSRS from September 19th to the 22nd on 2,074 registered voters across the U.S., Democratic Party candidate Kamala Harris received 48% support, while Republican Party candidate Donald Trump received 47%. However, the lead was much larger in a recent poll conducted by Reuters and Ipsos. The poll conducted on 1,029 people nationwide from September 21st to the 23rd, Harris received 47% support, while Trump received 40%, showing a 7 percentage point lead for the U.S. vice president. With such a tight race, winning key battleground states will be crucial for the candidates. However, even among the 7 battleground states, both Harris and Trump are neck and neck, with many results within the polls' margins of error. A recent poll by the New York Times and Siena College showed Trump with marginal leads in 3 of the 7 contested states, Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. Harris also leads Trump in 3 states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, while the 2 candidates are tied in Nevada. A total of 94 electoral votes are up for grabs in those 7 battleground states. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back here at home, Korea's largest hydrogen exhibition kicked off today to showcase the latest alternatives to fossil fuels amid the global campaign to reduce carbon footprints. Our Lee Soo-jin was there.
In the global quest to create a low-carbon future, hydrogen energy is a crucial renewable resource for reducing emissions. And the latest hydrogen technologies are on display at the 5th H2 Mobility Energy Environment Technology Expo. This year's H2 meet is the largest yet, featuring 317 companies and institutions from 24 different countries in attendance, and takes place in the city of Goyang, Gyeonggi-do Province from Wednesday to Friday.
Our country, along with the private sector, is working to lead the global hydrogen economy. We aim to expand hydrogen-powered buses and trucks to meet larger-scale demand and steadily build infrastructure, such as liquefied hydrogen refueling stations.
To back these initiatives, the government plans to have 660 hydrogen refueling stations by 2030, nearly doubling the current 332 nationwide. Expanding the availability of these stations is essential for commercializing hydrogen energy, which offers several advantages over electric vehicles.
Hydrogen vehicles can charge within 5 minutes, unlike electric cars, and can travel longer distances.
The event showcased gas tube trailers and liquid hydrogen tank trailers, which transport hydrogen to refueling stations. Gaseous hydrogen is designed for vehicles requiring rapid refueling, while liquid hydrogen is suited for heavy-duty applications such as long-distance trucks and buses. With the hydrogen market being projected to grow significantly as adoption of renewables becomes more widespread, local companies such as Hyundai Motor have already begun developing their own hydrogen value chain.
Hydrogen value chain business brand that spans from hydrogen production, storage, transportation, and application. And we are leveraging our group's affiliates, technologies, and business cases.
And on the local government level, provinces like Gyeonggi-do showcase their achievements, which include establishing hydrogen production facilities. With hydrogen a big part of the country's drive to go carbon neutral by 2050, these technologies will help push the hydrogen sector forward. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
On the entertainment front, girl group NMIXX will be the first K-pop act to partake as a panelist at the U.S. Billboard Latin Music Week. The event will be held from October 14th to the 18th at the Fillmore Miami Beach in Florida. NMIXX will attend the event on the 16th to talk about K-pop in the Latin music market. Billboard Latin Music Week is one of the biggest events in the Latin music industry. It celebrates its 35th anniversary this year. In the country's southwestern county of Boseong-gun, there is a special class for teachers, not students, so that they learn about the local culture of Jeollanam-do province. Our Song Yoo-jin explains what's behind all that.
Boseong in Jeollanam-do province is famous for green tea, pansori, and hemcloth. Some public school teachers in Boseong are going on field trips to experience dyeing fabric with natural materials despite the heat. The teachers are learning about local culture so that they can educate students, having experienced it beforehand.
This place has become an experience spot, so I should introduce it to my students and give them the same opportunities I had.
Boseong has various festivals each year, such as the Green Tea Festival and the Seopyeonje Boseong Sori Festival. The Boseong Office of Education has decided that its teachers will learn not only about natural dyeing, but also pansori and tea ceremony to educate them about traditional culture.
Our teachers have to know beforehand in order to teach our children. Also, we have decided to run field trips for teachers to set a foundation to raise our children as local Boseong residents by running an intentional, localized education process.
Since Boseong is also a home base for green tea, the educational office is also planning to instruct teachers on sustainable farming. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Despite rain falling here and there today, the daytime heat remained. Seoul soared up to 28 degrees Celsius, making huge daily temperature differences. Most areas will experience wide temperature gaps between day and night for the time being. There will be showers in most parts of the country tomorrow. The coastal areas of Gyeongsang-namdo province and Jeju Island are expected to have up to 20 millimeters, and most other regions will have around 5 millimeters. Skies will clear up from tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow morning, the temperature will be 20 degrees in Seoul and Gwangju and 22 in Busan, which will be about 2 degrees higher than today. Daytime temperatures will be 28 degrees in Seoul and Gwangju and 30 degrees in Busan, similar to today. Until this weekend, the daytime temperatures will rise, leading to hot weather. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
also remains committed to boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of this latest.
To discuss the current security environment.
The United Nations is powerful on the ongoing insecurity, expressing hope stock markets around the world have taken a hit amid speculation that the U.S. Federal Reserve Arirang.
31주년 헌터 뮤직 어워즈 2023
31주년 헌터 어워즈에 이렇게 많은 분들께서 관심을 가져주셔서 너무 감사드리고
전 세계가 함께 즐기는 진정한 음악 축제 헌터 뮤직 어워즈 2023 그런 K-팝 아티스트의 멋진 무대 다 같이 즐길 준비 되셨나요?
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama. A story of us where hope and despair coexist. Fun and refreshingly satisfying. K-dramas carry warmth and move people's hearts. Meet the fascinating stories of Korea through K-dramas.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Han-dan in Seoul. North Korea has intensified its provocations this month by launching another round of its trash balloon campaign while firing several missiles, including a ballistic missile equipped with a large conventional warhead. This follows the secretive regime's unveiling of a uranium enrichment facility, which some experts say has the capacity to produce 5 nuclear weapons per year. Meanwhile, North Korea's two-state approach has sparked fresh debate here in the South regarding unification. To help us navigate through these latest developments and their implications, our weekly commentator, Dr. Ko Myung-hyun, joins me in the studio. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.
It's always so good to be back.
And joining us virtually is former U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary of State Evans Revere. He's also a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be with you again.
All right, Dr. Go, let's kick things off with you. The Joint Chiefs of Staff have warned of a possible military response should North Korea's trash balloons pose a direct threat to the safety of South Korean citizens. How do you assess Seoul's response so far, and what kind of military action could be under consideration?
Well, for now, I think the Joint Chiefs of Staff has assessed that the scale of North Korean trash balloon campaign is actually approaching a dangerous level. And we know that North Korea has frequently sent the balloons in the recent weeks. And then, contrary to our optimistic expectations, some of those balloons, in fact, carried dangerous materials. In this case, especially not really an explosive, but we're talking about the small explosives that are used to time the balloons to explode in a certain location. So sometimes those devices fell to the ground and then started a fire on the ground, and it actually caused property damages. So clearly the South Korean government is concerned that if the North Koreans keep up this pace of these provocations, this could potentially lead to loss of life, which is the red line for any government, including the South Korean one. So I think this is essentially a warning to North Koreans that their campaign is approaching that level. So that could constitute a red line. But at the same time, it's necessary for the Korean government to be ambiguous about the red line, because you don't want North Koreans to play with that red line. So if North Koreans are aware that certain lines it's only after they cross certain line that the South Korean government is going to take certain action. They'll try their best to stay just below that red line. So in order to avoid such scenario, so the government is actually keeping the red line ambiguous and vague. But I think what we can gather from the Korean government's reaction is that essentially their assessment is that the North Korean campaign has become too intense and also approaching dangerous level. And if North Koreans, by mistake or maybe by intention, cross that line, I think the South Korean government will have to resort to a more energetic response than that they have shown so far. So especially if the damage or actually causes a loss of life on the ground, then probably South Korean government will have to resort to a limited exercise or firepower, essentially sending warning shots across the border or even attack the place of origin of the balloons launches. So I think before that happens, though, the South Korean government will have to communicate that very clearly to the North Korean side to ensure that if South Korean government takes action, that action is going to be limited and in scope, and also in terms of a geographic scale. And that way avoids a potential escalation that gets out of control.
I mean, it's just nonstop, right? More than 5,500 balloons in the past few months. That's just absurd. So perhaps it is about time for South Korea to raise its response level one notch. But of course, as you mentioned, within a rational level, so as not to provoke North Korea too much, and also keeping its red lines ambiguous. Now, Dr. Revere, a U.S. expert in nuclear nonproliferation, Jeffrey Lewis, said that a recently unveiled photo of North Korea's uranium enrichment facility suggests it can produce 95 kilograms of highly enriched uranium annually, meaning it can make 5 units of nuclear weapons a year. What are the implications of this?
Well, I'm convinced that Kim Jong-un's recent visit to a uranium enrichment facility and the release of photos of that visit to the public were aimed at convincing the international community that North Korea has the actual capacity to fulfill Kim Jong-un's repeatedly stated directive to increase his country's nuclear weapons capability exponentially, was the word that he has used. But I think it also tells us that North Korea wants Washington to know that the DPRK is not going to be deterred as it seeks to become a permanent nuclear power. The North Korean leader seems eager to send a message to the United States in advance of America's presidential election, and also a message to the next U.S. administration, regardless of who will lead that administration, that North Korea is and is going to remain a nuclear weapon state. So because of those signals, I think U.S. and Republic of Korea policy decisions going forward are going to have to be premised on the assumption that we're dealing with a regime that is determined to remain a nuclear power and remain a threat to us. The fact that the Pyongyang regime not only has the uranium enrichment facility shown in those recent photos, but also has another, probably more sophisticated facility, should also concern us very deeply. But all of this, getting to the core of your question, all of this underscores the danger that North Korea poses and the challenge that both our countries are going to face in dealing with Pyongyang's threat going forward.
Dr. Go, what is your analysis of the rare glimpse into the uranium enrichment facility, and also help us understand how Pyongyang was able to expand its enrichment program despite years of stifling sanctions?
So I think what the North Korea has shown essentially confirms the suspicions that we had for a very long time, that North Korea had yet another uranium enrichment facility besides the one that they had shown to Dr. Siegfried Hecker back in the 2000s. Reportedly located in Yongbyon. It seems that this is a separate facility, possibly located in Gangsan. That's what Jeffrey Lewis has pointed out. And what's interesting, though, is that We have seen evidence of North Korea procuring essentially a special type of a metal alloy from different countries around the world. Some of them from Russia, and these are made of maritime steel, which is a very strong form of steel. But at the same time, that type of steel, in fact, I mean, the centrifuges made with that type of steel is actually a very, I would say, basic one. So if indeed North Korea have been procuring these maritime steel pipes, say from Russia, and in fact those steel pipes have been basis of the centrifuges that we have seen just now from the North Koreans, then means that the process, I mean the speed of enrichment production is pretty much not on the upper bound expectation, probably sometimes some level lower than that, meaning that with the more basic form of centrifuges made of a more, I would say, like antiquated form of steel, it lowers our estimation of uranium production. So it means that either North Korea has more facilities like this, because in order to compensate for like a low rate of production, they have to have more production bases, or the North Koreans are producing not as much as they could, which means, though, that the North Korean could, in fact, asking the Russians to provide North Koreans with more advanced form of materials that could speed up the production of highly enriched uranium using the centrifuges, but with a more sophisticated and lighter and stronger materials. So I think that this remains to be seen, but then overall, this is still in the realm of speculation, but given the massive scale of North Korea's uranium enrichment facilities, each chance is likely that the North Koreans are really they're actually following their roadmap for massive production of nuclear weapons on time. So in that sense, it's overall a very threatening message coming from North Korea.
Meanwhile, Dr. Revere, North Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yul was largely expected to attend the UN General Assembly, but instead she headed to Russia for a Eurasian Women's Forum and the first BRICS Women's Forum. What do you make of this?
Well, I think faced with a choice between attending a United Nations General Assembly meeting where the DPRK would be, as it usually is, rather isolated and would be widely viewed as a pariah and a threat on the one hand, and a chance to further strengthen ties with Russia and pursue North Korea's interest in possible BRICS membership on the other, Pyongyang obviously opted for the latter. North Korea is very heavily invested in strengthening ties with Moscow, and I think this decision, this move, and this visit reflects that. I also think that as Russia's challenge in dealing with its war against Ukraine is reaching a new and a very dangerous stage, Moscow may have urged Pyongyang to dispatch its foreign minister to Moscow to coordinate the DPRK's continuing support for the war. Meanwhile, I think Pyongyang is very intrigued by Moscow's recently stated commitment to help the DPRK increase its participation in international organizations and dialogues. And I think towards that end, North Korea was probably, by this visit, eager to signal strong interest to Moscow about its willingness to become a more central player in Moscow's family of relationships.
And there has been a notable uptick in North Korea's interest in BRICS members as well, right, as it seeks to expand its diplomatic horizon within certain networks. And staying with you, Dr. Revere, Kim Jong-un's two-state approach and abandonment of unification goals sparked a fresh debate here in South Korea after the former presidential chief of staff, Im Jong-seok, said peaceful coexistence as two separate countries is not such a bad idea. President Yoon today was quick to respond, saying that abandoning unification goal is unconstitutional and will further raise security risks. Now, I want to ask you, what is Washington's take on Kim's two-state approach?
Well, I certainly can't speak for the United States government or provide the so-called Washington take, but I certainly can offer the assessment of someone who's been following these issues for several decades. North Korea, obviously, I think we all know, has definitively rejected its past pursuit of dialogue and reconciliation with the Republic of Korea. And instead of, as we know, Pyongyang is now pursuing a policy that focuses on hostility towards the Republic of Korea. And this policy includes the idea of the violent absorption of South Korea into a unified Korean state under North Korean rule. Many of us who work on North Korea have been saying for years that this is the real and always has been the real DPRK position on relations with the South. And my sense is that North Korea has now virtually admitted as much by following this new policy. This blunt new North Korean policy has very deeply embarrassed South Korean progressives for obvious reasons, because those progressives over the years have argued that the Republic of Korea should seek reconciliation and dialogue and peace with the DPRK. And over the years, these progressives have claimed that the Pyongyang regime wanted this as well. But the North Korean regime's new policy, I think, has destroyed this progressive argument. So now, in an effort, this is my take on things, in an effort to try to rescue what is left of their long-standing argument, some South Korean progressives have decided that the best way forward is to effectively accept the North Korean position that the two Koreas are separate from each other. So we find ourselves right now in the rather strange position of having a conservative government in Seoul arguing that the two Koreas are and must become one nation, while some on the progressive side in the Republic of Korea are arguing that the two countries are separate states. That latter view, of course, sounds very much like the North Korean position, which, of course, is designed to justify the DPRK's violent absorption of the South. So the progressives advocating this view have some serious explaining to do.
This really is quite an awkward situation indeed. Now, Dr. Ko, North Korea's provocations have intensified this month, including the launch of several missiles, one of which Pyongyang says is a new short-range ballistic missile equipped with a 4.5-ton conventional, ultra-large conventional warhead. Now, how do you assess the scale of Pyongyang's provocations in the lead-up to U.S. presidential election?
Well, it's always been the case that North Korea starts its provocation cycle rather small, with a small provocation that's oftentimes limited to the invariance of the Korean Peninsula. Then actually they grow the provocation from there to something to go past something much larger and has a strategic significance, such as a test of an intercontinental ballistic missile or a nuclear test. So, because we have seen this pattern being repeated over and over in the past, this is actually forms the basis for the estimation or expectation that North Korea could carry out major nuclear tests on the eve of the U.S. presidential elections in November, which is actually coming very soon. So, so that forms the basis of expectation. But at the same time, I think the North Koreans are sending many different messages at the same, with a multi-layer way of manner. So, for instance, the recent test of the ballistic short-range ballistic missile that supposedly carries a super large warhead, this is actually a response to South Korea. So South Korea has announced that it's going to complete the development of such a missile, which can carry a very large conventional warhead, which I think weighs around 9 tons. And North Koreans are essentially telling the South Koreans that they can match South Korean capability on an equal basis. It's not a message to the United States, but rather to South Korea. And also, there's a recent revelation that North Korea had, it was Kim Yo-jong herself who said North Korea detected the arrival of the U.S. nuclear submarine Vermont in Busan, and they even announced that they knew the exact time to the second of the submarine's arrival. So, which implies that North Koreans have strategic surveillance and reconnaissance capability, which can only come from space. So, it's in fact, North Koreans are trying to refer to the fact that North Koreans have been putting on the orbit a spy satellite, even though we suspect that those spy satellites made by North Koreans are low-tech, meaning they have surveillance sensors of a low resolution. Nonetheless, North Koreans are claiming that they have a much better capability now. So this is a strategic capability. So if North Koreans want to complete this picture, they're insinuating a picture to the international community that they have a very capable strategic capability now. It's a nuclear state with the surveillance and reconnaissance capability, remote sensors, and essentially a portfolio of missile capabilities that ranges from short range to intercontinental range. So if they want to complete this picture, the missing puzzle here will be a nuclear test. This is the reason why there's a growing expectation that North Koreans are going to carry out, finally, the much anticipated nuclear test, probably time for the U.S. presidential elections.
Dr. Revere, National Security Advisor Shin Won-sik has hinted that a South Korea, U.S., Japan trilateral summit could be held within this year. Do you think this will materialize? And if so, when is the most likely timing? I know you don't have the crystal ball, but...
Well, it's pretty obvious that the United States, the Republic of Korea, and Japan are clearly on track to hold a leadership summit, which, among other things, would mark the establishment of a secretariat that would further institutionalize and formalize their trilateral cooperation. I think at the same time, with the United States and Japan on the verge of leadership transitions after elections, I believe the three countries also are very keen to reaffirm their shared commitment to maintaining a very strong, cooperative, and vigorous framework that they've established, and they also want to demonstrate in a very public way that this partnership is going to continue. So I fully expect that there's going to be a trilateral summit in the coming weeks. The timing is obviously largely a matter of logistics and coordinating schedules. Although I think that having the new Japanese Prime Minister at the meeting would reinforce the message of continuity in a very interesting way. So I don't expect the meeting is going to happen on the next day or so, but I do expect perhaps shortly after a new prime minister is inaugurated in Tokyo that the three countries may go forward with this very important and very symbolic but also practically important trilateral meeting.
But Dr. Go, the U.S. appears less engaged with North Korea issues than before as the two ongoing wars loom large. President Biden made no mention of North Korea in his final speech to the UN General Assembly as president. What do you make of this?
Well, clearly the situation in the Korean Peninsula is relatively stable compared to other hotspots in the world. So I think this is obviously the reason why it's not really taking up much attention from the White House when it comes to the North Korean issue. And then also it's in part North Koreans to be blamed for this because North Koreans, they don't want to engage in dialogue with the international community regarding the situation in the Korean Peninsula. They've been very much focused on strengthening their relationship with Russia. So there's partly the reason, and also I think it also has to do with the fact that President Biden is on his way out. So it's not going to seek re-election. And then this speech at the United Nations General Assembly was a valedictorian speech for an outgoing president. So I think he wants to, I mean, though he's been talking about the current affairs and challenges that the United States is facing right now, he also wanted to imbue the speech with some sense of legacy. And you cannot really base your legacy on an issue that is not really going anywhere. So I think this was a reason why President Biden chose not to mention North Korea in his speech, but doesn't mean that this reflects the position of the U.S. government regarding North Korea. We know, as I mentioned earlier, the militaries of the two countries are still very much engaged in exercises and mutual visits, and as well as preparing together the readiness in case North Korea miscalculates and launches a major provocation. Also the example of that is the recent visit by the USS Vermont, a nuclear submarine. So the work is going on. There's a system behind it. So I think in that sense, I think we should be worried about the fact that President Biden didn't mention North Korea in his probably a major final speech, I would say.
All right, we'll leave our discussion there. Thank you, as always, Dr. Ko, for your perspectives.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Dr. Revere, for your valuable insights.
Good to be with you again.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama. a story of us where hope and despair coexist. Fun and refreshingly satisfying. K-dramas carry warmth and move people's hearts. Meet the fascinating stories of Korea through K-dramas.
자연이 빚어낸 선물, 통기인삼. 2024 경북 영주 통기인